You were never Caleb's wife, Nina, you were just the rented body carrying my grandbaby, Beverly said into the baby shower microphone. And before the room even stopped gasping, the blue ribbon tied around her wrist had already become the thing that would cost her the one title she loved more than mother. That was the sentence everyone remembers now. Not the cake, not the flowers, not the little game she had planned to make herself look charming. Just Beverly smiling in front of 40 people while my husband stood beside her with his hand on her back, and me sitting there with swollen feet under a table covered in gifts I had not been allowed to choose. But the shower was not where it started. That was only where Beverly finally said out loud what she had been training Caleb to believe for years. 6 months earlier, I was on the paper-covered table at my first ultrasound appointment, trying not to cry before the nurse even came in. I was 10 weeks pregnant. Caleb was supposed to meet me there from work. We had lost one pregnancy the year before, early and quietly, and this appointment felt like standing at the edge of a door I was scared to open. I kept checking the hallway because I wanted my husband there when we heard the heartbeat. Then Caleb walked in with his mother. Beverly had dressed like she was attending church, not a medical appointment, and she carried a pale blue gift bag before we even knew if the baby was okay. Caleb said, "Mom was close by, and I thought she could help keep me calm." He said it like I was supposed to be grateful that he had brought himself support to my body's most private moment. Beverly touched his sleeve and said, "He gets nervous, honey. I know how to steady him." That was the first time I understood that my fear did not count if Caleb's fear gave Beverly a reason to step closer. I sat up and said, "I only want Caleb in the room." My voice shook, but the words were clear. Beverly gave me the soft face she used when she wanted witnesses to think she was being wounded. "Of course," she said, but she did not move. Caleb looked at me like I had slapped someone. "Nina, don't make this ugly," he whispered. The nurse, a woman named Mara with silver hair pulled tight at the back of her head, looked at me and asked one clean question. "Who do you want in here?" Not who was upset, not who meant well. Who did I want? I said, "My husband." Mara opened the door and held it for Beverly. Beverly's smile thinned so fast I almost missed it. She set the blue gift bag on the chair anyway, as if leaving a flag behind. Caleb did not sit near my head. He stayed by the foot of the table with his arms crossed, embarrassed that I had made his mother wait outside. When the heartbeat filled the room, quick and impossible and alive, I reached for his hand. He gave it to me, but he was looking at the closed door. After the appointment, Beverly was waiting by the elevator with wet eyes and a paper cup of water she had not touched. She did not yell. Beverly almost never started with yelling. She started with concern because concern made other people do her work for her. "I hope you never make him choose between being a good husband and a good son," she said. Caleb stared at the floor. I put the ultrasound picture in my purse before she could touch it. That small movement made her notice me for real. In the parking lot, Caleb said, "You embarrassed her." I said, "You brought your mother to my ultrasound without asking me." He answered too fast. "She's part of this family." I asked him if I was. He did not answer right away, and that pause hurt more than a fight would have. Then he said, "Don't start measuring love like there isn't enough." That sounded generous until I heard what it meant. In Caleb's world, Beverly's need was a law of nature. My need was a demand. I drove home alone because Caleb said he had to take his mother to lunch and smooth things over. At home, I found the second blue thing. A narrow blue ribbon was tied around the spare key that used to hang inside our kitchen cabinet. It was not on the hook anymore. It was on the counter beside a note in Beverly's round handwriting. "For emergencies, since stress is bad for the baby." I stood in my own kitchen with the ultrasound photo still in my purse and understood that Beverly had not lost access that morning. She had gained a reason to claim more. Caleb came home after dark, smelling like the lemon chicken from Beverly's favorite restaurant. He carried leftovers for me, which was his way of saying he had been considerate while doing exactly what he wanted. I held up the key with the blue ribbon. "Why does your mother have this?" He sighed before I finished. Like my question was a chore he had expected. "She worries," he said. And honestly, after today, I don't blame her. That was the first time he used my boundary as proof that I needed supervision. I did not scream. I did not throw the food away. I put the key in the junk drawer and said, "No one gets a key to this house unless we both agree." Caleb rubbed his face. "It's not just your house. It's not your mother's house at all," I said. That line changed the room. Not because it was cruel, but because it named the thing everyone had been stepping around. Caleb looked at the spare key in my palm and said, I gave it to her because she needs to feel like she still has a place in my life. And that was the moment I understood my front door had never been only a door to him. The key hung from Beverly's blue ribbon between my fingers. I had just found it in the dish by the entryway, tucked under her note about emergencies and stress being bad for the baby. I was 10 weeks pregnant, still scared every time my body felt too quiet, and my husband was asking me to treat his mother's panic like a medical need. I asked him, what place does she need inside our house when I'm home? Caleb rubbed his forehead like I was making him solve a hard math problem instead of a betrayal. She worries, he said. After what happened last time, she worries. He meant the miscarriage. He said it gently, but the gentleness made it worse, because he was using the worst day of my life as a reason to hand his mother a key. I said, she was not the one bleeding. Caleb's face tightened. For 1 second, I thought that sentence might reach him. Then he said, that's not fair. And there it was. My pain was a fact only until it made his mother look bad. I put the key on the table and slid it toward him. Call her. Tell her to return every copy. Caleb did not touch it. He stared at the ribbon like it might answer for him. Nina, if I call her right now, she'll think you hate her. I waited, because a decent answer still had room to arrive. He added, she already feels replaced. That word hit a nerve I did not have a name for yet. Replaced. Not worried. Not excluded. Replaced. Like I had taken a chair that belonged to her because I married her son. I said, I'm your wife, Caleb. I'm not a woman who cut in line. He looked toward the hallway, away from me. You don't understand how much she lost when Dad left. His father had left Beverly when Caleb was in high school, and Caleb had grown up learning that his mother's loneliness was a house fire only he could put out. I had known that before I married him. I had seen the way Beverly called him for dead light bulbs, tax questions, and crying spells that began when we had date nights. But until that key sat between us, I had not understood the rule underneath it. Caleb was allowed to build a marriage only if Beverly still owned an entrance. That night, I did not argue until we were both exhausted. I took the key, walked to the door, and checked the deadbolt myself. Caleb watched me. What are you doing? He asked. Making sure your mother is outside, I said. He looked hurt, which almost pulled me back into the old habit of comforting him for the damage he had helped cause. I did not. I slept with the key under my pillow, not because it protected me, but because I needed to feel the shape of the problem without anyone explaining it softer. The next morning, I bought a small inside latch from the hardware store before work. It was the kind people use in hotel rooms, simple and ugly and strong enough to stop a door from opening more than 2 inches. I was not changing the locks behind Caleb's back. I was not locking him out of his own house. I was making sure no one could walk in on me while I was sick, sleeping, showering, or scared. When I came home, I put the latch on the door with a screwdriver from our junk drawer. My hands shook once, and I stopped until they steadied. Then I finished it. At 2:17 that afternoon, someone tried to unlock my front door while I was eating crackers over the sink. The deadbolt turned. The knob moved. The door opened 2 inches and slammed against the latch. My whole body went cold before my brain caught up. Beverly's voice came through the gap. Nina? Honey? It's me. She said it like I had invited her and then forgotten my manners. I stood there with a cracker in my hand, hearing her key still inside my lock. She had not knocked. She had not called. She had used the key while she knew Caleb was at work. I walked to the door but did not unhook the latch. Beverly, why are you using a key to enter my house? There was a pause just long enough for her to change costumes. Then she sighed. I brought soup. Caleb said you've been emotional. That sentence did 2 things at once. It told me Caleb had talked about me again, and it turned my boundary into a symptom. I said, leave the key and the soup on the porch. Beverly lowered her voice. Don't be dramatic. I'm not some stranger. The door pressed once more against the latch. Not hard, just enough to remind me that if I had not installed it, she would already be inside. Across the small front walk, our neighbor Elena opened her door. She was a nurse who worked nights, and she did not like noise during the day. She looked at Beverly's hand on my knob, then at the grocery bag hanging from Beverly's wrist. Everything okay here? Beverly smiled without turning her head all the way. Family thing. Elena did not move. If someone inside says leave it outside, leave it outside. It was not a speech. It was not rescue. It was one clear sentence from someone who had no reason to perform for Beverly. The pressure in my chest shifted. For the first time since the ultrasound office, another woman had heard the simple version and believed the simple version. Beverly pulled the key from the lock so sharply it scraped. "I was trying to help," she said. The soup bag landed on the porch with a wet thud. "You're making Caleb choose between peace and your pride." I said, "No. I'm making him choose whether our home has rules." Beverly looked toward Elena, then back at the crack in the door. Her voice went soft and poisonous. "A frightened woman should be grateful when someone steadier steps in." I did not answer. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and left the soup outside until she drove away. Caleb came home early with his tie pulled loose and his jaw set. He did not ask if I was okay after his mother tried to enter our house. He dropped his keys on the counter, pointed at the latch, and said, "Do you know how cruel this makes you look?" For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. I was standing in our entryway, with my purse still on my shoulder, my body tired in that deep, pregnant way that made every argument feel like it had weight. His mother had come to our house with a key I never gave her. The latch had stopped her. Elena had seen it. And Caleb was worried about the picture it painted of Beverly. I said, "She used a key on my door while you were at work." Caleb rubbed his forehead like I was giving him a headache on purpose. "She brought soup. She tried to come inside. Because she thought you might be sleeping, then she could have left the soup and texted." He turned from the latch to me, and his voice dropped into that careful tone he used when he wanted me to feel unreasonable without actually calling me crazy. "My mother is alone all day, Nina. You know that," she panicked. That word landed wrong. Panicked made Beverly sound scared. It made me sound like the danger. I took the blue ribbon key from my purse and held it out. "Then take this back to her. And get every copy." Caleb looked at it, but he did not take it. That was the first answer. The second answer came when he said, "Can we not make this into a whole thing tonight?" A whole thing. That was what he called my privacy. That was what he called his mother standing on our porch with a key she had no right to use. I put the key on the little table by the door. The blue ribbon curled beside it like something from a baby gift. "It already is a whole thing," I said. "You just don't want it to be your thing." He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge even though he was not hungry. I followed because I was done letting him escape into ordinary movements. "Did you give her the key?" I asked. Caleb kept his hand on the fridge handle. "She had one from when we went to Asheville last year. We changed the lock after that." He shut the fridge too hard. "I made her a new one because she lives 10 minutes away and emergencies happen. Not a misunderstanding. Not an old spare. A choice." He had made a copy of our house key and given it to his mother while I was pregnant, while I was already asking for fewer surprises, while I was still carrying the fear of the baby we lost before this one. I did not yell. If I yelled, he could make my volume the story. I said, "You made a copy of our house key without telling me." Caleb said, "Because I knew you'd react like this." That sentence did something clean and ugly. He had hidden it, and now he used my reaction to justify why he hid it. I felt the whole trap in one breath. If I trusted him, Beverly got access. If I objected, I became the reason he had to sneak. I put my hand on the counter to steady myself and said, "Tonight you sleep in the guest room." His face changed fast. "Nina. No, you gave someone access to my home without my consent. I need a locked door between us tonight." That was the first boundary he could not soften into a conversation. He stood there with his wedding ring tapping against the fridge handle, and for the first time that night he looked less sad than offended. "You're really going to punish me over my mother?" "I'm protecting myself from your decisions." He stared at me like I had stepped out of the role he knew how to manage. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. I did not need to see the name. His mouth tightened with the familiar guilt before he even answered. "I'm not doing this right now," I said, and I took the blue ribbon key from the entry table before he could slip it into his pocket. The next morning, I woke up before Caleb and called a locksmith from my car, not from inside the house. I kept the engine off and the doors locked while I spoke. I asked for the earliest appointment and paid the extra fee before I could talk myself into being polite. Then I called Elena. I did not ask her to rescue me. I asked if she could stand outside for 10 minutes when the locksmith came. Because I did not trust the day to stay quiet. Elena said, "I'll bring my coffee." That was all. No speech. No drama. Just a person who understood that a locked door is not rude when someone has already crossed it. Caleb came out while the locksmith was replacing the deadbolt. He was in his work shirt, hair wet, face blank with shock. "What are you doing?" he asked. The locksmith paused with the old lock in his hand. Elena stood at the edge of our shared walkway, holding a travel mug, looking at the ground on purpose. I said, "I'm changing the lock." Caleb laughed once, but it had no humor in it. "You can't just do that." "I can. We both live here. You'll have a key. Your mother won't." His eyes flicked to Elena, and that changed his tone. He stopped sounding angry and started sounding wounded. "So now the neighbors are involved?" Elena looked up then. "I was already involved when your mother tried to enter yesterday." Caleb's face went red, not because he was ashamed of what Beverly did, but because someone outside our marriage had named it plainly. The locksmith handed me 2 new keys on a plain metal ring. No ribbon, no note, no little performance of concern. I gave one to Caleb in front of Elena and kept the other in my palm. "No copies," I said. Caleb looked at the key like it was an insult. "You don't get to make rules like I'm a child," I said. "Then don't make me defend myself like I'm alone." The locksmith packed his tools fast. Elena took 1 sip of coffee and stayed until his van pulled away. That small choice mattered. Caleb could call me dramatic in private. He could not make the old story work with Elena standing 10 feet away. By lunch, Beverly had changed tactics. She did not come to the door. She sent Caleb messages, and Caleb sent me pieces of them like little stones. "Mom says she won't bother you anymore." Then, 5 minutes later, "She says she hopes you know she cried all night." Then, "She wants to know if she's still allowed to love her grandbaby." I did not answer any of them. At 3, Caleb texted, "We need to talk after work." At 4, he sent, "She bought something and doesn't want you to take it the wrong way." That was the sentence that made my stomach tighten, because Beverly never gave gifts without a hook inside them. The hook arrived at 6 in the form of a delivery driver with a boxed rocking chair on a dolly. Caleb got home right behind him, and Beverly pulled into the driveway 30 seconds later like she had timed it from around the corner. The driver asked where to put the box. I said, "We didn't order a chair." Beverly stepped forward with a bright, injured smile. "I did. For the nursery." Caleb's shoulders dropped in relief, like a gift meant peace. I looked at the label. The chair was addressed to our house, but the note taped to the top said, "For my nights with the baby, since Mommy will need rest." Mommy. Not Nina. Not even my daughter-in-law. Just a tired body Beverly planned to replace when it suited her. I told the driver, "Return it." Beverly's smile froze. Caleb said my name under his breath. Beverly put one hand on the box, claiming it. "This is exactly what I mean, Caleb." I try to help and she turns it into rejection. I said, "You bought furniture for nights with my baby without asking me." Beverly did not look at me. She looked at Caleb, because Caleb was her real audience. "I raised you. I know what a newborn needs." Caleb said, "Nina, it's just a chair." That line told me he still thought the object was the issue. He did not hear the claim hidden inside the gift. The driver shifted his weight and asked again, "Ma'am, do you want it inside or back on the truck?" Beverly's hand stayed on the box. Caleb looked at me like I was about to embarrass him. I felt the old pressure rise, the pressure to be easy so other people could stay comfortable. Then I looked at the plain key in my hand, still warm from being held all day, and I made my voice calm enough that no one could use it against me. "Back on the truck," I said. The driver nodded and pulled the dolly away before Caleb could save the moment. Beverly's mask cracked, but only for me. Her eyes sharpened while her mouth stayed soft. "You are going to need family," she said. "Women who push everyone away learn that too late." Caleb reached for her elbow. Not to stop her, but to comfort her. That was the new injury. He did it in front of me, beside the return chair, after the key, after the latch, after everything. I walked inside and closed the door with the new deadbolt between us. Through the door, I heard Beverly crying, Caleb murmuring, and the delivery truck backing out of our driveway with the chair she had bought for a baby she was already trying to schedule away from me. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Beverly asked me to host a family conversation this Sunday, and she said Caleb agreed you'd come. On Sunday, Caleb put his car keys in his pocket and said, "If you don't come to Mom's, she's coming here." Like my locked door was a problem he still had the right to solve for her. That was the first time I heard the threat cleanly. Not as panic. Not as family drama. As a plan. Beverly had lost the key with the blue ribbon, so Caleb was offering her a different door, my guilt. I was still in my first trimester then, still checking every cramp like it might become blood, and my husband was asking me to sit in front of his mother so she could negotiate access to my body, my house, and my baby. I said, "We meet somewhere public. 30 minutes. I drive myself." Caleb stared at me like those were insults instead of safety rules. Then he said, "Fine, but don't embarrass me." That sentence did more than hurt. It told me who he thought the danger was. Not the woman who had tried to unlock our front door while I was home alone. Not the woman who had sent a rocking chair with a note that made my nursery feel claimed. Me. I was the embarrassment because I had stopped making his mother comfortable. I texted Elena before I left. "Meeting them at Sycamore Cafe. If I don't text you by noon, call me." She answered in seconds. "I'm awake. Park near the door." That tiny instruction steadied me more than Caleb had all week. Beverly was already at the cafe when we arrived, and she had not come alone. Caleb's Aunt Ruth sat beside her with a paper napkin folded into a hard little square. Ruth was not cruel in the loud way Beverly could be. She was the family referee, the one everyone called when Beverly cried too much and Caleb stopped answering his phone. Seeing her there told me Beverly had changed tactics. She was not trying to break in today. She was trying to make my boundary look like a sickness that needed witnesses. Beverly reached for my hands before I sat down. I kept them in my lap. She let her own hands hover for one extra second, so Ruth would see the rejection. Then Beverly whispered, "I have been praying for your heart to soften." Caleb sat between us, not beside me. That was new information too, even before anyone spoke. My husband had physically placed himself where his mother could look at him first. Ruth cleared her throat. "Nina, we're all here because this baby needs peace," I said. "Then we should start with the person who copied a key without my consent." Beverly's face trembled on command. "I brought soup to a pregnant woman who wouldn't answer the door." I looked at Caleb. "You told her I was home alone?" He rubbed his forehead. "I told her you weren't feeling well." Beverly jumped in fast. "Because I'm his mother." He was scared. There it was, the old exchange. Caleb's fear became Beverly's permission. My privacy became her medicine. I said, "I'm going to ask one question. Caleb, did you agree that your mother could come to our house whenever she thought I needed help?" The table went still. Caleb hated direct questions in front of other people because he could not turn them into fog. He said, "I told her we needed support." I said, "That is not what I asked." Beverly touched his sleeve. "Honey, don't let her put you on trial." Ruth looked from Beverly's hand to Caleb's face, and for the first time, I saw doubt land on someone who had come prepared to correct me. Then Beverly opened her purse and pulled out a soft yellow folder. My stomach dropped before I knew why. She slid one sheet toward me, not a legal paper, not anything official, just a handwritten schedule in Beverly's neat church lady script. Week 1 after birth. Beverly nights. Week 2. Beverly mornings. Hospital. Beverly waits with Caleb if Nina becomes emotional. At the bottom, Caleb's name was written in a different pen. Not a signature, exactly. Just his name, like a promise he had made and then tried to make smaller. I did not touch the paper. I looked at Caleb. He whispered, "It was just a draft." Beverly said, "He asked me because he knows he can't do this alone." That was the midpoint of my marriage, though I did not have that language then. Not the key, not the chair, this. My husband had been planning a version of my recovery where I was the patient, Beverly was the partner, and he was the son being rescued. Ruth picked up the schedule before I could speak. Her mouth tightened as she read it. "Beverly, you told me this was about an apology." Beverly's softness cracked. "It is. Nina owes this family one." Ruth's eyes lifted. "You said you were not asking for the hospital." Beverly snatched the page back. "I am asking not to be erased." The cafe noise kept moving around us, forks and cups and ordinary Sunday voices, but our table had gone sharp enough to cut skin. I heard my own voice come out calmer than I felt. "My miscarriage was not your erasure." Beverly froze. Caleb flinched. Ruth looked down. I knew then that Caleb had told Beverly more than I had ever agreed to share. Beverly had not just taken my key. She had been given the most private room in my grief and had started decorating it for herself. She said, "I lost a grandchild too." I said, "No. You lost an idea." I lost blood in our bathroom while Caleb held my phone and asked who he should call. Caleb whispered my name, but I did not stop. You do not get to use that day as a passcode. Beverly's face changed. The wounded mother disappeared, and something harder stood up behind it. This is what she does, she told Ruth, but her eyes stayed on Caleb. She makes you afraid to love anyone but her. Caleb leaned toward her before he seemed to notice himself doing it. I watched the motion, and something inside me went cold in a useful way. Ruth pushed her chair back. Caleb, did you agree to this hospital plan? Caleb said. I agreed we needed Mom involved. Ruth said. That is not an answer. The same words I had used came out of his aunt's mouth, and Beverly heard the danger in them. She turned on Ruth so fast the napkin on the table fluttered. After everything I did for you when Frank left, you're going to sit here and judge me? Ruth went red. There was Beverly's other hook, favors with chains on them, love with invoices hidden inside. Ruth stood. I came because you said Nina was shutting everyone out. You didn't say you tried to schedule her delivery. Beverly said. Sit down. Ruth did not. That small refusal shifted the whole table. Not because Ruth saved me. She did not. But Beverly had built that meeting to make me look unstable, and now her own witness had become a person with a boundary. Beverly's control did not vanish. It showed a crack. Caleb looked trapped, and for 1 second I almost pitied him. Then he said, Nina, can you please just say you'll think about it so we can go? Not, I'm sorry. Not, Mom. Stop. He wanted the sentence that would let him leave without choosing. I took the handwritten schedule and folded it once. Beverly reached for it, but I put it in my bag. This came to the table. It leaves with me. Beverly's voice went low. You don't get to keep family property. I stood. My birth is not family property. Caleb followed me into the parking lot, angry now that there were no witnesses close enough to hear every word. You humiliated her. I unlocked my car. She brought a schedule for my postpartum body. He said, because you keep shutting her out. I turned then. Yes, I am shutting out the woman who tried to enter my house, claimed my nursery, and planned my hospital room. Caleb's jaw worked like he was chewing back the truth and hoping it would dissolve. Then he said, I can't abandon my mom just because you're pregnant. There it was, the truth beneath every compromise. Caleb was not afraid of losing me. He was afraid of becoming a son Beverly could not control. Caleb drove away from the cafe parking lot while I was still holding the yellow folder against my belly, because his mother had called him crying, and he decided her tears were an emergency, and my shaking hands were not. Elena stood beside me until his taillights turned onto the main road. She did not say what I already knew. She just opened her passenger door and said, Get in. You are not going home alone. On the ride back, my phone kept lighting up with Caleb's name. I let it ring. Then Beverly called from an unknown number. Then Caleb again. The folder sat on my lap like something alive. Beverly had written my recovery in time blocks. Caleb had called that help. In the cafe, Aunt Ruth had gone quiet when she saw the schedule, and that silence had scared Beverly more than yelling would have. Beverly could survive anger. She knew how to turn anger into proof that I was unstable. But she did not know what to do with someone looking at her plans and finally seeing the shape of them. The next 5 months did not fix what happened at that table. They only taught Beverly to become more careful and Caleb to become more tired. She stopped trying the door, but she started sending things. A tiny blue blanket with Grandma's little man stitched in the corner. A framed ultrasound copy Caleb had sent her without asking me. A list of approved baby names with Beverly's maiden name circled twice. Every gift came through Caleb, and every objection became another reason he said I was making pregnancy harder than it had to be. I kept working. I kept going to appointments. I kept the yellow folder in a drawer beside the blue ribbon key, because some days I needed proof that I was not inventing the pattern. By 33 weeks, my blood pressure had started climbing. My doctor told me to reduce stress where I could. Caleb repeated that sentence to Beverly, and Beverly heard only one word: stress. Then she made herself the cure. The next morning, Elena drove me to a prenatal appointment because my hands trembled when I tried to hold the steering wheel. I expected Caleb to be waiting in the parking lot. He was not. He was inside the building, standing near the check-in desk with Beverly beside him. Beverly had a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a soft little smile on her face, like the cafe had never happened. Caleb looked relieved when he saw me, and that relief told me he had hoped I would behave because we were in public. Beverly took one step toward me. "Sweetheart, I'm not here to fight," she said, loud enough for the receptionist to hear the sweetness. "Caleb and I agreed that emotions are too high, so I'm just here to help remember what the doctor says." My baby kicked once, low and hard, as if my body had answered before I could. Elena stayed at my shoulder. I looked at Caleb. "Did you bring her?" I asked. He rubbed his jaw. "She was worried. I didn't want her sitting at home spiraling." Beverly's smile tightened on the word spiraling, because Caleb had told the truth in the wrong direction. The nurse called my name. Beverly moved with us as if her feet had already been approved. I turned before she reached the hallway. "No," I said. The nurse stopped with her hand on the door. Caleb whispered, "Nina, don't make a scene." That was when Beverly changed her face. The soft smile vanished. Her voice dropped, but it cut deeper than if she had shouted. A scene is what happens when a mother refuses help, and everyone else has to live with the consequences. The waiting room went still in that small way people go still when they are pretending not to listen. I did not argue with Beverly. I looked at the nurse and said, "I need to change who is allowed back with me. Right now." The nurse looked at me, not at Caleb, not at Beverly. "Who do you want?" she asked. It was such a simple question that I almost cried. Not because it was gentle, because no one in that hallway treated my answer like a family vote. I said, "Elena." And only Elena. Caleb's head snapped toward me. Beverly let out a hurt little sound, but the nurse opened the door wider for Elena and me. Caleb could have stopped the whole thing from breaking if he had said one clean sentence. He could have said, "She is the patient. We listened to her." Instead he said, "So you're punishing me now?" I walked through the door. Inside the exam room, the nurse took my blood pressure twice. The first number made her mouth flatten. She asked if I felt safe at home. Not in a dramatic voice. Not like a movie. Just a direct question while the cuff squeezed my arm. I looked at Elena, then back at the nurse. "I changed the lock because my mother-in-law had a key I did not give her," I said. "My husband gave it to her. Now she is trying to control who is with me when I give birth." The nurse did not gasp. "She did not make it bigger than it was. She made it usable." "Then today we keep the room quiet," she said. "And before you leave, we make sure your chart matches your wishes." The doctor came in 5 minutes later, and for the first time in months, nobody interrupted me while I described my own body. I told her about the headaches, the pressure in my chest when Caleb's phone rang, the way Beverly had been planning my postpartum nights as if I were a guest in my own recovery. I did not hand over the yellow folder like a weapon. I did not need to perform. I just told the truth in a room where the truth did not have to be negotiated with Beverly's feelings first. The doctor listened, then said, "Stress is not just uncomfortable right now. It is data your body is giving us. Your support person needs to lower your risk, not raise it." That sentence did more damage to Caleb's argument than any speech from me could have. Not because it proved Beverly evil. Because it made the choice practical. If Caleb brought chaos into labor, he was not being loving. He was being dangerous. Before I left, the nurse updated my chart. Elena became my support person. Beverly was marked as not permitted in the exam room or delivery room unless I gave permission. Caleb was not removed as my husband, but he was no longer the person who could speak over me if I was tired. When the appointment ended, the nurse walked us out a side hallway that avoided the main waiting room. That small mercy lasted only until the elevator opened. Caleb was there alone, pacing with his phone in his hand. Beverly was nowhere in sight, which made me more nervous, not less. Caleb saw the papers in my hand and understood just enough to panic. "What did you sign?" he asked. I said, "My wishes." He looked toward the parking lot. "Mom is in the car. She feels humiliated." I said, "Then take her home." His face closed. "Nina, you can't keep escalating every time you feel uncomfortable." I looked at the papers, then at him. "I am not uncomfortable. I am unsafe around decisions you make for her." He had no answer for that, so he chose the one Beverly had taught him. "You are tearing this family apart." When I got home, the chain lock was in Caleb's hand, and Beverly was standing behind him in my nursery, like the doctor's warning had been nothing but background noise. Elena stepped in before I did, because I stopped so hard my stomach tightened. The little brass plate from my front door was on the kitchen counter beside Caleb's drill. The rocking chair was back by the crib, angled toward the room like it had been waiting for me to give up. Beverly did not cry this time. That scared me more. She folded her hands and said, I told Caleb a mother shouldn't feel like a trespasser in her child's life. I looked at Caleb. You took the chain lock off. He wiped his palm on his jeans. It was making everything worse. Worse than your mother being in our nursery. After my doctor told you this stress is hurting me. Beverly made a small sound, like I had slapped her. I came to make peace. Elena said, peace doesn't bring a drill. Beverly's mouth tightened, and for 1 second she looked at Elena, like Elena was a piece of furniture that had spoken out of turn. Then Beverly turned back to Caleb, soft again. This is what I mean. She has people talking for her now. She's shutting you out before the baby is even here. Caleb looked exhausted. Not guilty. Exhausted, like my boundary had tired him out and Beverly's fear had earned his sympathy. Nina, I'm trying to keep this family from blowing up. It already blew up, I said. You just keep asking me to stand in the smoke. He flinched, but he did not move toward me. He moved toward the drill. That small choice told me more than any speech could have. He had not come home to repair trust. He had come home to repair his mother's access. Beverly changed tactics when she saw my face. She stopped defending the chair and started sounding worried. I called Ruth after the appointment, she said. She agrees this has gone too far. A pregnant woman changing locks and banning family from medical visits is not normal. That was new. Beverly was not trying to sneak in anymore. She was building a story around me, and she wanted witnesses before I could breathe. My hand went to the side of my belly. The baby shifted, and the movement steadied me. Call Ruth now, I said. Caleb stared at me. What? You said she agrees. Call her. Beverly's chin lifted. That is not necessary. It is if you're using her name in my house. Caleb put Ruth on speaker. Beverly reached for the phone, but he held it away from her. Ruth answered on the third ring. Caleb, I told your mother I'm not coming over there. Beverly's face changed before Ruth said another word. Caleb looked at his mother. You said she agreed. Ruth heard him. I agreed Nina should not be ambushed in her own home. That is what I agreed to. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator kick on. Beverly's eyes filled, but this time the tears did not soften anyone. Ruth kept going, and her voice shook with anger, not uncertainty. Bev, you told me you were going to apologize. You did not tell me Caleb was removing a lock. You did not tell me you were in that nursery again. I am trying to save my family, Beverly said. No, Ruth said. You are trying to keep being the center of Caleb's life, and you are using that baby as your last excuse. Caleb lowered the phone like it had burned him. Beverly reached for his arm. She has always resented how close we are. Ruth said. I resented cleaning up after you every time you called control love. Caleb ended the call without saying goodbye. He stood there with the dead phone in his hand, and Beverly turned on the only person left who still might protect her. She is turning everyone against me, Beverly said to him. Even my own sister. Are you really going to let your wife do that to your mother? For 1 second, I thought Caleb might finally step across the line toward me. Then he said, Nina, can you just apologize for locking her out like she's dangerous? Something inside me went still. Not dead. Clear. She is dangerous to my peace, I said. And right now, so are you. Caleb looked at me like I had betrayed him. I'm your husband. Then act like one. Put the chain lock back on. Ask your mother to leave. Tell her she is not coming to the hospital unless I invite her. Beverly whispered. Caleb. One word. That was all it took. His shoulders bent toward her voice before his feet moved. He had been trained to hear her pain as a command. I picked up the blue ribbon key from the small bowl by the door. I had left it there because I wanted to remember what an open door had cost me. Now I held it in my palm and looked at the missing chain lock. Elena, I said, will you take me to your place? Caleb's head snapped up. You're not leaving. I am. This is our house. It stopped feeling like my house when you unscrewed my safety to comfort your mother. Beverly stepped forward. Running away while pregnant is reckless. I turned to her. No, staying where you can get in is reckless. Elena did not ask me if I was sure. She went to the bedroom and came back with my hospital bag, the yellow folder, and the sweater I kept by the bed. That simple movement did what Caleb had refused to do all day. It treated my safety like a fact, not a debate. Caleb blocked the hallway. Not with force, not quite, with his body and his panic. If you walk out right now, you're choosing Elena over me. No, I said. I'm choosing a locked door over a removed one. His eyes went wet. Mom said this would happen. That sentence landed harder than the drill. Beverly had not only predicted my leaving, she had prepared him to see it as proof against me. I stepped around Caleb. He did not stop me. At Elena's apartment, I put the hospital form on her kitchen table and crossed Caleb's name off the first support line. My hand shook once. Then it steadied. I wrote Elena's name where his had been. I did not do it because I hated him. I did it because birth was not the place to teach a grown man who his wife was. Elena sat across from me and said, "You don't have to decide your whole marriage tonight. You only have to decide who gets through the door." 3 weeks after I moved into Elena's spare room, Beverly sent out invitations to a baby shower I had never approved. She called it a celebration. Caleb called it one peaceful afternoon. The invitation called Beverly, Grandma Beverly, in blue script bigger than my name. I stared at it on Elena's kitchen table while my son pressed under my ribs, and for one wild second I wanted to tear it into pieces. Then Ruth called. She had received the same invitation, and her voice was flat with disgust. "She is going to use a room full of women to make you look cruel if you don't go," Ruth said. I knew that already. Beverly had lost the key. She had lost the doctor's hallway. She had lost Ruth as a silent witness. Now she wanted a microphone. I told Ruth, "Then I'll go with witnesses of my own." Elena drove me. Ruth met us at the door. Caleb waited inside the fellowship hall with his tie too tight, and his phone in his hand. He looked at me like I was a problem. He was proud of himself for not naming. "Thank you for coming," he said. I looked past him. The room was covered in blue ribbons. There were blue ribbons around the napkins, blue ribbons on the gift table, blue ribbons looped through the handles of favor bags. At the front of the room, Beverly stood beside a cake that said "Welcome Baby Cole" in frosting, though Caleb and I had not publicly announced the name. On her wrist was a wide blue satin ribbon tied into a bow, the kind a host wears when she wants everyone to know the room belongs to her. She had dressed in soft cream and pearls, and she moved through the women from her church, like a queen being congratulated, before a birth she had not carried. When she saw me, her mouth opened in that trembling smile she saved for audiences. "There she is," Beverly said loudly. "Our little mama finally made it. Our little mama." The phrase slid over the room like sugar over rot. Caleb came to my side, but not close enough to feel like a husband. Close enough to steer. "Just get through today," he whispered, "for me." I looked at the table where my name had been printed on a small place card next to Beverly's, as if we were co-hosts of my body. "For you?" I asked. He heard the danger in my voice and looked away. The shower games started. Guess the baby food. Right advice for mommy. Tie a blue ribbon around your wrist if you promise to help Grandma Beverly spoil him. Every time someone said Grandma Beverly, Beverly touched the ribbon on her wrist like it was a crown. I sat through 15 minutes of it, because I wanted to know how far she would go when she thought the room was hers. Then the gifts started. A woman from Beverly's church handed me a box of diapers, and before I could thank her, Beverly leaned into the microphone and said, "We all know Nina will need more help than she admits." A few women laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they do not know if a joke is safe. Ruth's jaw tightened. Elena stood near the back wall with her arms folded. Caleb put his hand on Beverly's back. It was not much, just a small touch. But I saw Beverly feel it. She lifted her chin and kept going. "Motherhood is humbling," she said. "Some women think pregnancy makes them the only authority in the room, but a baby belongs to a family." The room changed temperature. I looked at Caleb. He looked at the floor. Beverly smiled harder. "That's why I keep telling Caleb not to worry. I know exactly what my grandson needs. I raised a good man." Ruth said, "Beverly." Just one word. A warning. Beverly ignored it because she thought the audience belonged to her. She turned toward me with the microphone still in her hand. "And Nina, honey. I know emotions have been high, but one day you'll understand that carrying a baby doesn't mean you own him." The room went silent. My heartbeat slowed in a strange, useful way. Beverly mistook the silence for power. Caleb's hand was still on her back. She laughed once, a small bright sound, and said the sentence that ended everything. "You were never Caleb's wife, Nina. You were just the rented body carrying my grandbaby." No one moved. Even the women who had smiled for her earlier stopped smiling. The microphone made the last word bigger than she meant it to be. "Grandbaby. Not baby. Not child. Hers." I looked at Caleb first, Because some part of me still wanted to see one clean reaction from my husband before I stopped waiting forever. His hand was still on her back. His face was white, but his hand did not move. Beverly saw my eyes go to it, and for the first time that afternoon, uncertainty crossed her face. Ruth stepped forward. "Give me the microphone." Beverly clutched it. "I meant she has been emotional." Ruth said, "You meant what you said." A woman near the punch bowl whispered, "Oh my God." Another picked up her purse. The room was no longer Beverly's room. It was a room full of witnesses. I stood slowly. My legs felt heavy, but my voice did not. "I want everyone to hear me clearly," I said. Beverly opened her mouth, but Ruth took the microphone from her hand before she could turn the room again. Ruth handed it to me. That small handoff sounded louder than applause. I looked at Beverly's blue ribbon first, then at Caleb. "My son is not a family trophy. My body is not a rental. My grief was not your permission slip. My home is not your emergency room. And my birth is not a place where anyone earns access by making a scene." Beverly's eyes flooded instantly. Too late. The tears came after the sentence, not before. I turned to the guests. "Thank you for the gifts. I am leaving now. Anything sent through Beverly will be returned. Anything sent through Ruth will be considered. Beverly will not be at the hospital. She will not be in my home. And until she can say my name without trying to erase me, she will not be called Grandma by my child." That was when the blue ribbon on Beverly's wrist became more than decoration. Her hand flew to it as if I had reached across the room and cut it off. "You can't take that title from me," she said. Her voice cracked, but not with sadness, with rage. "I just did," I said. Caleb finally moved. He stepped toward me, not her, and for 1 second the room waited with me. Then Beverly made that broken breathing sound, the one that had trained him since childhood. Caleb stopped. He turned back. Not fully. Just enough. Enough to tell me the answer. I handed the microphone back to Ruth. "There it is," Ruth said quietly, but the microphone was still on, and the whole room heard her. Beverly looked around then, and understood what she had lost. Not a child. Not blood. Not love. She had lost the public story that made her look like the wounded grandmother. She had exposed herself with her own voice. Elena carried my bag. Ruth walked on my other side. Caleb followed us into the parking lot, calling my name, but Beverly followed him, crying loudly enough for the women still inside to hear. "Caleb, she humiliated me," she said. "She stole my grandbaby in front of everyone." He stopped between us again, exactly where he always lived. I looked at him over the roof of Elena's car. "Come alone tonight if you want to talk. Not with her. Not on speaker. Alone." Beverly grabbed his sleeve. "If you go to her after what she did to me, don't come home." The sentence fell into the parking lot like a dropped plate. Caleb looked at his mother. Then at me. Then at the women by the fellowship hall doors, all pretending not to watch while watching everything. He said, "Nina, can we not do this here?" I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because even now, after a microphone, after 40 witnesses, after the sentence he could never unhear, he still wanted the problem to be the place where it was visible. I got into Elena's car. Caleb did not stop me. Beverly stood in the doorway with her blue ribbon still on her wrist, but it no longer looked like a crown. It looked like evidence. That night, Caleb called 9 times. I answered once. He said, "Mom is devastated." I said, "I know." He said, "She says you took away the one thing she was living for." I said, "Then she needs a life that is not built inside my child." He went quiet. I heard Beverly in the background, asking if I was on the phone. I said, "You are not alone, Caleb." He whispered, "She's scared." "Then sit with her," I said. "But do not bring her to my door." He said, "If you keep me away from the birth, I don't know what happens to us." That was the threat beneath all his sadness. Not loud, not cruel in the way Beverly was cruel, but still a threat. Give him access on his mother's terms, or lose the marriage. I put the phone down before he could make me answer fear with surrender. Elena slid a cup of tea across the table. Ruth texted one sentence a minute later. "She is already telling people you plan to ruin the shower." I typed back. She had the microphone. Then I opened my hospital bag, took out the blue ribbon key, and placed it beside my birth plan. One blue ribbon had opened my eyes. Another had closed a door. 5 weeks after the baby shower, Caleb called Elena's phone at 2 in the morning and said his mother might be dying. Ruth was already standing in Beverly's kitchen beside a half-eaten bowl of ice cream, telling him, "If she can threaten Nina between bites, she can wait for you without dragging a woman in labor into it." I heard Caleb stop breathing on the line. He had expected panic from me. He had expected me to fold. Instead, Elena put the phone on the counter, and Ruth's tired voice filled the apartment like a door closing. "Your mother texted chest pain because she knew you would run," Ruth said. "I called an ambulance anyway. Beverly refused to get in unless Nina came too." Caleb said, "Nina, please, just talk to her for 1 minute." My stomach tightened before the contraction did, low and hard, and I gripped the edge of Elena's table. Elena saw my face change and reached for the bag by the door. Caleb was still talking. Still trying to make his mother's fear my assignment, I said, "Call 911 if she is sick. Call Ruth if she is lonely. Do not call me to manage her." Then another contraction bent me forward, and for the first time that night, Caleb heard something he could not turn into a debate. Elena took the phone and said, "We're going to the hospital. Do not bring your mother." She hung up before he could answer. On the drive, Beverly called 6 times from Caleb's phone and twice from her own. I did not answer. The yellow folder was in my bag beside the hospital form, not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because I wanted one last reminder of the life I was refusing to enter. Between contractions, I told Elena, "If Caleb comes alone, I'll let him in." Elena did not soften that for me. She only asked, "And if he doesn't?" I watched the streetlight slide over her windshield and said, "Then he doesn't meet our son first." Saying it hurt. It also made the pain clean. At the hospital desk, the nurse asked who was with me, and I said, "Elena." My voice shook, but it did not wander. The nurse looked at the chart, saw the changed support line, and put a blue band on Elena's wrist. That tiny band did what months of pleading had not done. It made one boundary visible. Beverly had worn a blue ribbon at the shower, like a title she could claim. Elena wore one now, because I had chosen her. 5 minutes later, Caleb arrived at the locked maternity doors with Beverly behind him in a coat thrown over pajamas, her hair clipped wrong on one side, her face ready for an audience. Caleb pressed the call button and said, "It's me. I'm her husband." Beverly leaned toward the speaker and added, "And I'm the baby's grandmother. She's confused. She's under stress." The nurse looked at me before she answered the door. That mattered. Nobody looked over my shoulder for Caleb. Nobody asked Beverly to explain me. I was on the bed, breathing through another contraction, and I said, "Caleb can come in alone." The nurse repeated it through the speaker. "Only Caleb." Through the glass, I saw Beverly turn on him fast. Her mouth moved in sharp little bursts. Caleb looked at me through the door, then at his mother, then back at me. His hand lifted toward the call button again, like if he pressed hard enough, the rule would become someone else's fault. Beverly shouted loud enough for the hallway to hear, "If she keeps me out, she is using that baby like a weapon." The contraction broke, and I sat up just enough to see Caleb clearly. I did not raise my voice. "Come in alone," I said. "Right now." The nurse opened the door a few inches. It was the smallest opening in the world, and it was enough. Caleb stepped forward. Beverly grabbed his sleeve. Not gently. Not like a scared mother. Like someone stopping property from leaving. "If you walk in there without me," she said, "you are choosing her fantasy over the woman who made you." Caleb froze with one foot over the line. The nurse waited. Elena waited. I waited too, but not like before. I was not waiting to be chosen. I was watching him choose. He pulled his sleeve free halfway, then Beverly made the sound. It was not a cry. It was a practiced break in her breathing, the one that had trained him since childhood. Caleb turned back before she even touched her chest. The nurse closed the door. That was the moment the story became simple. Not easy, but simple. Caleb had been offered the birth of his son with one condition. Arrive as a husband, not as his mother's escort. He could not do it. Elena put her hand on my shoulder, and I said, "No more calls." The nurse nodded and changed the room phone to silent. Labor did not pause for heartbreak. It took everything private and made it physical. Elena counted with me. A nurse wiped my forehead. Someone told me my son was close. Outside the room, Caleb knocked once more, then stopped. Beverly's voice rose in the hall, sweet now, wounded now, telling someone she had only wanted to help. I heard Ruth answer from somewhere near the doors. No, Beverly. You wanted to be first. Then the hallway went quiet. Ruth did not come into my room. She did not try to become the hero. She only stopped feeding the lie at the exact moment the lie needed witnesses. My son was born before sunrise. He came out furious, slippery, and loud, with one fist tucked against his cheek, like he had arrived ready to argue with the world. When they put him on my chest, the room narrowed to weight and heat and that wild little cry. Elena cut the cord because I asked her to. The nurse asked his name, and I gave the first name Caleb, and I had once chosen together. For the middle name, I did not use Beverly's maiden name, though she had written it into her yellow folder like a family order. I gave him my grandfather's name, the man who used to fix broken cabinet doors without making anyone apologize for needing help. Caleb came to the postpartum room 4 hours later. Alone, finally. His eyes were red, and his phone kept lighting in his hand, but he did not answer it. I let him stand beside the bassinet. I let him look at our son. I did not hand the baby over right away. Caleb whispered. She went home with Ruth. I said, good. He swallowed. I didn't understand how bad it looked. That old sentence would have pulled me toward him once. I would have explained my pain until he could feel forgiven for noticing it late. This time I said, it did not look bad, Caleb. It was bad. He nodded, and the nod cracked something in him, but not enough to rebuild trust in one hospital room. He asked if he could hold the baby. I said, yes, and then you need to leave. We will talk when I'm home and when you can talk without reporting back to your mother. He flinched at that, but he did not argue. He held our son for 3 minutes. He cried silently the whole time. Then his phone lit again with Beverly's name, and he turned it face down instead of answering. It was a start. It was not a cure. When he handed our son back, I saw his hands shake. I'm sorry, he said. I believed he meant it. I also knew meaning it was not the same as changing. 2 days later, Elena drove me home. Caleb was not there. He had gone to Beverly's house after the hospital and sent one text saying he would stay there until things calmed down. I read it once and did not reply. My brother met us at the front door with a toolbox, not a speech. He had already replaced the chain Caleb removed. He had moved Beverly's rocking chair out of the nursery and into the garage, facing the wall. I stood in the nursery doorway with my son against my chest and saw the space Beverly had tried to claim become plain again. Crib. Diapers. A lamp. No throne. The yellow folder went into the trash without ceremony. The blue ribbon key took longer. I held it while my son slept against me, and I felt the last pull of the old habit, the one that said access was love and refusal was cruelty. Then I called the locksmith and changed the deadbolt too. Caleb and I did not fix our marriage in one brave conversation. Beverly did not become harmless because one door closed. But the old arrangement ended there. Caleb could visit by asking me, not by arriving with his mother. Beverly could send gifts through Ruth, or not at all. My son would not learn that love meant surrendering the room you were standing in. That night, after Elena left and the house went quiet, I carried my son to the front door to check the lock one more time. The blue ribbon from Beverly's key was tied around the new chain. Not as a decoration, not as a memory, as a warning. Beverly had wanted a title. What she lost was access. And in my house, that was the first peace my son ever slept through.